Hello, my name is Libby Wentz, and I'm the Vice Provost and Dean of the Graduate College at Arizona State University. I'm also a professor in the School of Geographical Sciences and Urban Planning, and I've been one of the Plus Alliance Fellows since the beginning of the partnership. It's my pleasure today to have the opportunity to continue with these interviews on some of the Plus Alliance leaders. And today we have with us Rimjhim Aggarwal, who is an associate professor in the School of Sustainability in the College of Global Futures. And she's someone who has been sort of a longtime friend and colleague of mine. We've taught classes together, and we've been part of the Plus Alliance together. So it's really my pleasure to be able to conduct this interview and to learn a little bit more about her and the work that she's doing. And so I'm going to just go ahead and get started with some of the questions so that we can, really dive in and hear a little bit more about your work and the role that the Plus Alliance has played in this. We kind of want to go back a little bit farther because, a lot of what you do today, around international development and the work that you do around water and human rights and a lot of the work that you do probably stems a lot from your own upbringing. And so, can you tell me a little bit about your own upbringing and who or what inspired you to provide to start your initial studies in economics?
Okay, thank you, Libby, and thanks everyone for this opportunity to share my work. This is great, and it's been a great honor and privilege to be part of the Plus Alliance. I've been a fellow as well, start right from the beginning. So now about me, both my parents were born in what is now the Pakistan, what is now Pakistan. That was part of undivided British India, and they had come to India as refugees when the country got partitioned. And that was a very traumatic experience for them. They had to leave all their possessions and they came in with hardly anything with them. And the trauma of the partition really shaped my parents and my grandparents' lives. And it was, I think, provided the deep motivation, particularly for my father, um, who saw education as the way to transform not only his life, but that of his family and of the newly independent country. And in fact, despite all the struggles, he managed to come to the US to get a PhD. He got various scholarships, worked really hard. And it is his stories of struggle and the deep aspiration to transform his life and lives of people around him that has provided me inspiration all through my life. It was all our stories were weaved around this trauma of partition and rebuilding and resilience. And that I think has been the foundation of my own values and my own, where I draw my inspiration from. So, my father came here for a PhD in plant breeding and plant genetics and was very deeply engaged at the time. This was in the 60s when he was here in the Kennedy years, talked a lot about life with Kennedy as the president. And then he also, when he came back to India, this was the time when the Green Revolution was just starting, and he was very deeply engaged with it. So I grew up with stories of the Green Revolution as a transformational strategy for agriculture in India and the way it could lift people out of hunger and poverty. So that has really shaped my own research and my life.
That's really inspirational and really great to hear how much your own family and your father had an influence on you. That's really wonderful. So your research and your teaching lie at this interface between sustainability and international development. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that entails and what that involves?
So yeah, so I came here to do my PhD in economics. I was, as I said, very deeply inspired by my father's own PhD experience here. And the way I was taught, particularly international development in the economics department, was we were told that the world is divided into two, okay, very simply speaking. So there is the industrialized West and there is the underdeveloped rest of the world. And the industrialized West offers a model of what we call development that the rest of the world needs to follow, and that there is a linear path and there are stages. So if you follow that path, a linear path with prescribed stages, you would be like what the industrialized West is. And we were all indoctrinated into that theory. But then as I grew older, I realized, I mean, this is all a big sham. I mean, we know that the industrialized West is not sustainable, that it doesn't hold a model for what the rest of the world needs to do. And this is what motivated me to look at this interface between international development and sustainability, because I think sustainability has dismantled or completely abolished, I would say, the theories of international development that I was taught as a student. And also, on the other hand, you cannot talk about sustainability just here in the local region. Sustainability is a global issue, and it needs to recognize that we need to not just be sustainable, meaning just keep doing what we are doing, but we need to fundamentally rethink in of this in a world which is highly unequal, where there is large sections of people who are not even able to meet their basic needs. And so, how are you able to meet the sustainability challenge while raising the lives and well being of people all around the world? So, I think that is, both fields are intrinsically tied, they need to learn from each other. But at the time I started, I found that there was very little intersection between the two, and that needed to be explored deeply.
And so, in looking at some of your work, it seems that you advocate what we would call sort of a systems approach to tackling these sustainability challenges. Can you talk a little bit about, what that means and how you think about it? Maybe give an example of that kind of work.
So, yes, let me start with an example that is close to my area of work in international development. This is the Sustainable Development Goals that have been advocated by the UN and have been adopted by countries around the world. Now, if you look at the goals, there are 17 of them. One is on ending poverty, ending hunger, sustainable water, sustainable energy, sustainable cities. Now, you can look at these goals individually, but to pursue these goals individually is going to lead to a big mess. I think we need to think about the 17 goals as a system, because system meaning that these are deeply interconnected. But goals like water and energy are being pursued, and they are being governed using sectoral approaches which are very siloed. So you administer energy very separately from how water is governed. And when you are pursuing these goals, you are not necessarily thinking about well-being of people or inequalities or how do we need to develop our cities. So a systems approach really looks at the interconnections among the various elements. And we are now beginning to realize that a lot of our problems in sustainability are because we have failed to look at the interconnections. In academia, particularly, we have become so specialized in our respective very narrow areas of work that we don't recognize the trade offs and synergies between the different themes we pursue. And that often leads to unintended consequences. There is a lot of potential in looking at these, leveraging these interconnections to find solutions.
That's fantastic. I'd like to build on the systems approach here a little bit more and talk specifically about how the Plus Alliance can support this kind of work that you're doing. Can you talk about sort of what you've done specifically with the Plus Alliance and building on the systems approach
Mhm.
that you have?
Yeah, sure. So, I was talking earlier about these sustainable development goals, which has become now the blueprint or sort of providing the overall framework for how you pursue international development. But as I said, there are these 17 goals which need to be thought of as a system. But that's not, if it all sounds good, but if you think about practically, okay, how am I going to do this? No individual person or no individual institution I would say, has the capability to look at this as a systems approach and then convert it into action, into action and pursuing strategies that are holistic and integrated. And so when I looked at this, I was very intrigued by these goals and the need for a systems approach. But I could see that I could not do it individually, and I could not even do it with colleagues just here at ASU. So being part of the Plus Alliance offered me, I thought this was a tremendous opportunity. And this met up to the challenge that President Crow and the other presidents from the other two universities had put upon us to think about something big, to think about something grand that goes beyond what we can do at our respective universities. And so I applied for a seed grant that I was fortunate got funded, and I had this collaboration with colleagues from the different Plus Alliance universities, some of which are focused, some of my colleagues are more focused on gender issues, let's say, on energy, water. And it was great to have the institutional support to work collaboratively to build an integrated framework for studying the Sustainable Development Goals as a system and provide an action framework and solutions that you could do collaboratively because we couldn't pursue it on our own.
So I kind of want to build on this a little bit more. So thanks for those great answers. So I think about food systems, energy systems, water systems, and then also some of your work looks at this almost systems of systems, what they call the food, energy, water nexus. Can you tell us a little bit? So I think of that as being kind of systems of systems. I don't know if you think of it that way, but I'd be interested in hearing about your work analyzing the food, energy, water nexus and its significance and how that potentially ties back to the work that you're doing with the Plus Alliance.
Yes, thanks. That's a great question. And it's this work on food, energy, water nexus is a great example of the systems approach that we need to build on and develop. So if you think about, let's say, a lot of my work focuses on food system, but I realize that food needs our production of food, distribution of food, processing and consumption of food are now highly energy intensive. So, for example, whenever energy prices go up, it impacts all aspects of our food system. Similarly, our food system is very intensive in water and the governance of water, the control you have of water over water. But these three sectors, food, energy, and water, are administered in various siloed sectors. So there is a separate agency managing food, water, and energy. And these people in these different agencies rarely talk to each other, although their work impacts each other in a very significant way. And we are seeing that here a lot in Arizona as well as worldwide, that the governance is very siloed, whereas if you think about these systems, there are deep interdependencies, like food is dependent on energy and water, and energy production in turn needs water. Water production here in Arizona, we get our water from the Colorado River, which is hundreds of miles away. And it's a very energy intensive process. So, whatever happens in the energy sector impacts the water sector and vice versa. So, thinking about these interconnections is very important, both from a governance standpoint and the way we look at it academically. So, in our academic disciplines, we have been trained narrowly. We have very deep specializations. A person is a food expert or an energy expert or a water expert. And similarly, on the sectoral side, these are siloed sectors. So, the challenge here really is to understand these interdependencies and to be able to then govern these sectors building on these interdependencies. So you work together and collaboration is very important. And in order to motivate that collaboration, the stakeholders need to see what is the value for me to be able to collaborate with people in other sectors. So in our work, we are doing, first of all, what we did was the first action we took was we engaged with all the stakeholders in the three sectors in Arizona. This project looks at Arizona, but has implications worldwide. So we had these set of workshops with stakeholders in the three sectors, and we asked them what they mean by this nexus and systems approach. And we could see that they understand it intuitively, they recognize the importance of it, although they don't know all these buzzwords of food, energy, water nexus. They understand it intuitively, but they don't quite understand how to then translate it into their everyday work and their strategies. So, the second major action we have taken is to build a modeling framework that brings these three sectors together. And we are modeling the resource interdependencies. And the model actually right now has hundreds of variables. So, the next challenge is how do we translate the work we are doing in our academic disciplines in the university to work that can be easily applicable and translatable to the groundwork at the everyday activities in these different sectors. And so we are using a number of visualization tools which can help the users see how these interconnections work. The visualization is a very powerful tool. And from that, building the user interface, we are working in our team. We have several computer scientists who are helping us build a user interface where, as a user, as say a water sector manager, I can say I'm interested in, let's say, the population in the city is projected to increase by this much. What implications does it have on my water activities, and how do I need to collaborate with the energy sector, which I need a whole lot more energy to be able to transport and use this water. And then a major user of water is agriculture. So how do I get the agricultural stakeholders on board with the strategies I'm pursuing?
That's fantastic. I actually want to dive a little bit deeper into one of those sectors, specifically the water sector, because I know you've done some work on water governance in Arizona. And you mentioned the importance of water for the agricultural industry, which of course is related in some parts to food. But what can you tell me a little bit about what you've learned regarding some conflicts between the agriculture and the indigenous communities regarding water rights and the limited impact of sort of short term decision making? How do you think we can, or what do you think there is in terms of a need to develop some new narratives to help solve this problem?
Yes, so in Arizona, this is a very important issue because we are here on the lands of the indigenous people. And our actually the water we have in Arizona is largely due to the work, the irrigation canals that were built by the indigenous communities here. And so the reason why we have a city here and why we are here is because of this incredible stewardship by indigenous communities, but their rights were taken away. And it's only recently that we've had a number of legal suits which have brought back the water to the indigenous communities, but it's a long, drawn out, and highly conflicted process where the indigenous communities are now just securing their water rights. And there is a very long history of how we got water here in Arizona. From the Colorado River, we hold junior water rights in Arizona. There are six other states that share the water with us, and we have junior rights. And now, with climate change and the long term drought that we are in, um, our state recently collaborated with other states in coming up with a drought contingency plan, which implies that given the drought conditions, Arizona's water supply will be very sharply cut given the drought conditions. And one of the first people who are going to be affected by these cuts are the non-indigenous non-indigenous farmers in the valley. And this is something that we are now working on because a lot of our food supply comes from the non-Indian farmers. And if we cut that water supply, what does it mean in terms of our food production in the region? And not just the production part, but agriculture as a way of life. So this is was a big lesson for me coming here, because as I said, I was trained as an economist. And if you look at pure economic value, then the value of food production is gets marginalized very often by the other competing needs, particularly the needs of urbanization and urban development and new settlements, new townships coming up in this rapidly urbanizing region. So agriculture just always gets marginalized and shortchanged. But in my research, where we have gone around doing listening sessions with farmers, engaged deeply with farmers, and with other community members, we discovered that there is a lot of cultural value in agriculture. People want to preserve that way of life. And our students, particularly, it's very strong among the younger generation. So we have to go beyond the narrow economic value to considering broader societal and cultural values, and thinking as a community, to taking together the needs of all the stakeholders on what we want that vision of the future for agriculture. What is the place of agriculture in this broader vision, where we of course need to urbanize and need to take into consideration the way of life and quality of life in this urban area? What is the importance of agriculture? And that has been reinforced now with the pandemic. This has been the great big stressor, where we have now realized the importance of some amount of local production for resilience, which actually we never thought was important. We thought we could always get our food. If so long as we are growing here and wealthy, we can always rely on trade and get food from California and other places. Now, with the disruption of supply chains, I think this has brought some renewed interest in thinking about the value of local production.
So, I can totally understand why the systems approach is so important and so valuable for the work that you're doing. Agriculture as a business is certainly an important consideration, not only here in Arizona, but in other places as well. I've also learned that you're one of the founders of the EMS Lab Peace Project. Can you tell us what this is and how this relates to sort of your work in agriculture and in business and sustainability and international development?
Yeah, sure. So this is a project which is called MPeace Labs, which stands for Empowerment for Peace through Leadership in Agribusiness and Sustainability. So this was a project I started a couple of years after I arrived in ASU, and this came out of this very strong realization that all these incidents that we are seeing around us related to international terrorism and violence very often stem from instability in rural communities, where you're not able to meet your agricultural livelihoods. You don't have enough food, that drives young people to violence and terrorism. And so the conviction is that to build a peaceful world, you need to have a very strong foundation in agriculture, in ensuring that not only enough food is produced, but it is accessible. So thinking about food as being foundational to peace, that's first part. And the second part, we discovered that if we want to really build a resilient agricultural system for the future, we need to have people to be able to do it. But unfortunately, we are seeing that a lot of young people leave agriculture, particularly in rural areas. They are moving into cities, and agricultural sector is just left with older people, and particularly now women, who are left behind. And agricultural sector has historically been marginalized quite a lot all over the world, and particularly in the developing world. And so we wanted to start a project where we could build this foundation for peace through agriculture, and by empowering young people to become leaders in their community in starting agribusiness projects. So this uh, project was started in partnership with the with African Commission, we had several African countries as partners, and we also had a major private sector partner, which is Jain Irrigation, which is very committed to sustainable agriculture. This is an agribusiness which is headquartered in India, and I've been very impressed by their sustainability principles. They were very interested in starting a training program for young people. And we thought that getting the university, the private sector, community leaders, and UN bodies and um, African Commission, etc., together would be a great way to start a long term training program for the young people. I see a lot of optimism in sort of training the next generation to thinking about sustainable agriculture. So this was a program which we started a 5-year training program where we would select community leaders, young community leaders from largely the developing world, but also from the industrialized world. We've had participation from 25 to anywhere 30, 40 countries all over the world, particularly in Africa. So we choose young people who have shown some amount of leadership in their community to come together, and then we provide this training. We bring experts from all over the world who are not just academicians, but people who have been engaged in solutions for sustainable agriculture and building agribusiness. And because we've been doing it in partnership with private companies, there is a lot of input that comes from the business community. But the idea is not about large corporate business, but how to start agribusiness in local communities by training these young people. And we've developed this using the idea of train the trainer. So every year we train these young people to start their agribusiness, and then they become the trainers to start, to keep the cycle going. And in these workshops, what was interesting was that it was very hands-on. We asked the young people who came to the workshop to come up with a draft plan, and all through the workshop they would get mentoring to further refine and develop their business plan and their overall plan of how they want to develop their idea, and then help them actually implement that plan in their local communities through a very close mentoring network. And it was all very hands on through a number of field visits. We held several of these training programs we had them in India. We had 3 in India, 1 in US, 1 in Senegal. And so the idea was to take them to a lot of field visits, provide them actual examples of innovations in agriculture, and then mentor them through their own plans.
Well, it sounds like some really outstanding outcomes from this initiative, and I love the empowerment component to this, and it's really been sounds like it's had a really terrific impact on both individuals and those communities. That's really fantastic. So I want to, kind of go from that sort of community individual level and really thinking about this from a global perspective, because of course, Plus Alliance is very much a global, uh, it has global interest in mind. And I know that's been in your research area throughout your career as well. So this is a really critical time for the planet to halt the impact of climate change. And do you think that there are solutions that you've worked with, like from this lab, that have an ethical, social, humanistic, and economic perspective? How can universities do more, and what in particular would you recommend?
Okay, yeah, that's a tough one to answer. Um, so I think universities have a lot of potential that I've realized working in all of these projects. But I think we need to transform the way we educate and the way we do research, because a lot of particularly our research in the universities has been very ivory tower kind of research, where we do research and we publish for our colleagues, not for the community. And I think the this I've heard all through my tenure here at ASU, and particularly from our president, about how we need to make our research work for the communities that we serve. We are often encouraged to think about the public value of the research that we are doing, and I think this is very important. So I think the first part is really transformational for our own selves. I mean, all the faculty here, as well as the staff and students at the university, we need to think about the public value of the work we are doing. I think that is first. So the transformation always begins with ourselves. So once we have transformed that, and the way to do that is to work very closely with communities, I think. Engage with the communities, make them feel a sense of co-ownership, and collaborate with them to think about the solutions. I think in collaboration, then, this is where universities can play an important role as knowledge brokers, as knowledge co producers, and implementers of solutions. And a sense of, as you said, we have the other challenge for me has been I was trained as an economist, but to think in a more multidisciplinary manner and collaborate with my colleagues in other disciplines, particularly in politics and sociology and also engineering and the hard sciences, of how do we think collaboratively work towards innovative solutions. And I think universities can play a very important role. And one other quick point I would point out, which came out of actually doing this work with the universities, with the communities, is the role of the university as a broker in highly conflictual situations. So, for example, in my work here in Arizona with farmers, uh, I found a number of farmers talking about how they are so marginalized. People in the water sector or the energy sector don't bring them to the table in important discussions about the future of the state and what the vision of the state, what we want to do. Here, agriculture is just left out. And we found that as people from the university, whenever we convened these meetings, we could bring these different stakeholders who often don't talk to each other, to bring them to a neutral platform where they can feel empowered and safe to voice their opinions and work collaboratively towards a solution.
I love that word on collaborative because, of course, it's collaboration between different, public, private, nonprofits, and so forth. I assume that extends broadly. Can you? I want to return a little bit to specifically the Plus Alliance, and of course, that's a collaboration between three universities. How can that collaborative format in the Plus Alliance help support and continue uh, not just your work, but the work in general to find solutions?
Yeah, collaboration now is the next big buzzword, and we will need to ensure it's not just a buzzword that we keep throwing around. That when you actually engage in collaboration, you also realize the tremendous challenges it comes with that comes along. I mean, there is tremendous value, but also challenges. And amongst the challenges is that if you want to do collaboration in a meaningful and impactful manner, you need to invest a lot of effort into it. And we as people, university researchers, and also we are human beings, also we have our families, also the time is very, very scarce, and we are always faced with this challenge. This engagement process is very time intensive, and when I'm thinking about it as a researcher, about how to allocate my work, I need to have the proper incentives to be able to engage in this highly time intensive effort. If I don't see the rewards and the recognition from doing this, I'm not going to engage in it. So I think what I thought was very important at ASU, which has sort of motivated all my collaborative work, and now I see reflected in Plus Alliance, is that the collaboration needs to be reflected in the entire institutional system on how the rewards and incentive structure for faculty, staff is set up. to be able to get recognition for this work. So to have the support from the president's level for these collaborations, because as you know, as researchers, we often collaborate with universities, with researchers from different universities, but we do that on our own initiative, and if we don't see the reward for it, we discontinue that. So to have a long term, and that's the other part, this engagement needs to be long term, and in order for it to be long term, there needs to be strong institutional support. And I think this is what is very innovative about the setup of the Plus Alliance. And I would say it's transformative, and it's a model for possibly other inter-university collaborations to have this level of support coming right from the high level on how you are recognized for your efforts in collaboration.
What gives you some hope for the future?
I think in the university setting, it's always my students. I mean, my mother often asks me, why do you put so much effort into your teaching? It's the same course. But of course, the subject is constantly evolving. We need to keep reading. But I think even though it may be the same course, we get a new cohort every time. And the students are really what inspire me and motivate me and give me hope for the future. I mean, it's really, to be honest, it was the students who deepened my interest in urban agriculture and local agriculture, because our younger, this was not true of my generation. When I decided to work on food and water issues, I was often told this is sort of not the hot area to pursue in economics. There were this agriculture, as I said, has often been marginalized. This is traditional. What is there to innovate here? But I think our younger generation is um, very perceptive about what the problem is, and they have a real stake in what the future would be. And so they are very motivated to go beyond just, for them, sustainability is not just about getting a nice, high paying job, but it is about bringing change, about how can I be a change maker. And our young people, our students are very motivated, and they are, I think, they are the people who are going to drive this whole process of change. And so I'm very excited to be in a place where we engage with these young people. They give us a lot of inspiration and hope for the future.
I love that connection to the students and early careers professionals. So, what any specific lessons that you would want to share with them or to pass on?
I think the first part is really pursue your passion. And I think this is the biggest lesson for me from my own career. I think I came to the US as a foreign student, and I was always very insecure about the financial part. And I thought a lot of my decisions were driven by, would I get a secure job? What are my career prospects? And so on. And that, I mean, one can understand that given those circumstances, and that it will always be true. But I think one needs to strike a balance, and I see the younger people in today's, this generation, I think, is far more capable than I think our generation was. For us, financial security came first, but I think this generation is fortunate to some extent, have some financial buffers to be able to pursue your passions. We were told first be secure and then pursue your passions. But I think one needs to turn that card around. If you really deeply believe and pursue your passion in a very holistic and determined way, the passion will lead you also to getting financially secure. So I think it needs to be turned around. And so pursue your passions, but don't pursue them on your own. Build teams. So you need to work in teams with other disciplines, talk more, collaborate, and also work with communities on the ground, and build partnerships, get people who think like you together, and then start from there, and then also engage with people that who may not agree with you, and think about what is it that will get you to drive the change that you're passionate about. Pursue your passion, work in teams, work with communities, and think about the long term. I mean, there may be immediate short term failures and challenges, but I think if you have that goal and passion in mind, I think that can be a tremendous game changer. And think about, starting from your local, think about it in scale. I mean, this is one other thing that the the university's presidents encourage us to think about all these solutions at scale. The solutions that we are coming up with need to meet the challenge of the problem that we have. The scale needs to match, and we can start small, but I think our vision needs to be broader and at scale.
Well, Rimjim, thank you so much for your time and for being able to share your experiences and your ideas and your insights. It's really been a pleasure talking to you today.
Yeah, thanks so much for this opportunity. It's always a great pleasure to interact on these Plus Alliance activities, and it has been my very deep honor and privilege to be part of the Plus Alliance. I've learned a lot from it myself, and I've grown tremendously as a scholar, and I hope I've passed that on to my students and early career professionals and other people around me. So, thank you so much
I
for
agree.
this opportunity. I've really enjoyed the conversation.